Allah salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So we'll start the program with Marcia. Yeah.
بخیر امام حسین ابھی تو سلام پڑھا پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد برائے خوشنودی امام زمانہ بلند تر صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد فدا ہوں اس پاک سلامی ہے جس کا نام حسین میرا معین میرا آقا میرا امام میرا معین میرا آقا میرا امام حسین صبا کو بھیج کے روزے پہ کر رہا ہوں دعا کرے قبول الہی میرا سلام کرے قبول میرا سلام حسین بلا کی زمین پر ہوا تھا انہیں کاورود تو پھر کے دیکھتے کا مقام تو پھر کے دیتے تھے قبر کا مقام حسین سنا نہائے کسی سنگ دل نے لاکھ کہا رسول کا نواسا ہے میرا نام رسول کا نواسا ہے میرا نام حسین نہ پوچھو وقت وہ کیسا تھا جب مدینے سے چلے ہر کا لیتے ہوئے سلام چلے ہر کا لیتے ہوئے سلام فدا ہوں اس بار جب خاتمہ بخیر ہوا فوج شاہ کا کوثر پہ قافلہ گیا پیاسی سپاہ کا گھر لٹ گیا جنابے رسالت بنا کا خاک اڑائی دیا یہ تھا بارگاہ بھائی تینے رفیق نا وہ نور عین تھے دو بہنیں رونے والی تھی دو بہنیں رونے والی تھی حسین تھے فرماتے تھے کہ آئے تاخیر اجال اکبر کے بعد کون سا عزیز کا مال اب مجھ کو ایک برس کے برابر ہے ایک پال موتا ہے اب یہ ہے شجر زندگی کا بال ایک جا چوری گلوں پہ جو چلتی تو خوب تھا یہ جان ان کے ساتھ نکلتی تو یہ جان ان کے ساتھ نکلتی تو خوب تھا ہم سب کے بعد خلق سے جانے کو رہ گئے سر پیٹنے کو اشک بہانے کو رہ گئے اس نوجوان کا داغ اٹھانے کو اس نوجوان کا داغ اٹھانے کو رہ پیری میں آٹو کرے کھانے کو رہ گئے بیٹا کہاں خبر جو دم انتقال اتنا نہیں کوئی کہ گرو تو سنبھال اتنا نہیں کوئی کہ گرو تو سنبھال لے سوئے لاشے پسر جا پڑی نظر چلائے دل کو تھام کے سلطان بیروبار سوتے ہو کیا دھرے ہوئے رخسار خاک پار اکبر اٹھو کے گھوڑے سے گرتا ہے پدر بولے پدر کو نیند میں قربان آپ کے آؤ نماز عصر پڑھو آؤ نماز عصر پڑھو ساتھ آپ کے عباس نامدار ترائی سے اٹھ کے آؤ ہکتا ہے قلب جر سب جگر کے گھاؤ چھڑکو میری زیرا پجو پانی کہیں سے پا چلتے ہوئے ادم کے مسافر سے ملتے جاؤ غفلت کی تم کو نیند ہے شبیر کیا کرے میری طرح کسی کو نہ بے کس خدا تیری طرح کسی کو نہ بے کس خدا چلایا فوج کو پسر سادنا بکار لوگ گھیر لو حسین کو سب مل کے ایک بار پلٹے پھرے سواروں کے لے کر رسالہ دار دو غول باندھے آئے کمادار دا سزا پھر افغانوں میں تیغوں میں بالوں میں گر گئے بیکس حسین بچیوں والوں میں گر گئے بیکس حسین بچیوں والوں میں گر گئے گرتے ہیں آپ کون سنبھالے کوئی نہیں سینے سے کون تیر نکالے کوئی نہیں سب مر چکے جانے والے کوئی نہیں سب مر چکے جانے والے کوئی نہیں بیگاں پڑے ہیں گود کے پالے کوئی نہیں دیکھا سے آپ زورے سپاہے عدو کا ہے مجھ جس کا دیکھتے ہیں وہ پیاسا لہو کا ہے مجھ جس کا دیکھتے ہیں وہ پیاسا لہو کا ہے فضا نے جا کے خیموں میں بیووں کو دی خبر ہے میرے خوزاتے کا کٹتا ہے تن سے سر بستر سے اٹھ کے گر پڑے سجادے ناگر خیمے سے نکلی بیوی بچوں کو چھوڑ کر ہلتا تھا عرش حضرت زینب کے بیل سے گر گر کے دوڑتی تھی کہ میلو حسین گر گر کے دوڑتی تھی کہ میلو حسین سے چلاتی تھی ارے میرا بھائی ہے کس طرح لوٹی ہوئی علی کی کمائی ہے کس طرح دریا کی درخوں کا طرح ہے کس طرح دریا کی درخوں کا طرح ہے کس طرح سونے کی جاؤ سے پائی ہے کس طرح راستہ دے آئے زمین کے فلک کی ستائی ہوں میں اپنے پیارے بھائی سے ملنے کو آئی ہوں میں اپنے پیارے بھائی سے ملنے کو آئی ہوں شیخ کرانے کی جو آنے لگی صدا دوڑی ادھر نبی کی نواسی برہنا پا دیکھا بہن کرتے ہوئے بھائی کا گلا دیکھا بہن کرتے ہوئے بھائی کا گلا آنکھوں پہ ہاتھ رکھے گری دل مرتضی سے کلیجہ پھٹ گیا زہرا کی جائی کا اٹھی تو دیکھا میرے پاس اپنے بھائی کا اٹھی تو دیکھا میرے پاس اپنے بھائی کا
Jazakallah. So, Mu'mineen, as you are aware, this is the last night of the three lectures, and we are very honored that we got the privilege to listen to Sheikh Jafar-e-Azaz's lectures on this topic. And inshallah, we hope as a community that we will be seeing more of him in future years and future dates as well, inshallah. So, with that, I'd like to invite Sheikh Jafar-e-Azaz on the member and to place the member and start the speech.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So before we begin, 2 points, inshallah. The first one is my thanks to everyone for the kind invite and opportunity to serve. If there have been any shortcomings on my side, then please do forgive me. But I hope that this series has been of benefit to you in some way. The idea behind this series has not only been for me to present the work of the book that we published. As I mentioned on another occasion, we also want to be able to publish a much more rigorous look into the Islamic economic system. And so, if you have feedback, ideas, the ways in which we can apply some of these points practically, then please do let me know, because your experience of this will help inform the next work as well, inshallah. The second thing that we want to be able to mention is that tonight we will be using the slideshow very minimally. Actually, what I want is for you to be able to use the verses yourself. So you all have your phones with you, yeah? Normally, you hear Maulana say, please put the phones away during Majlis. I'm going to tell you the opposite. Take out your phones. And do you have a Quran app on your phone? Yes? So either you can use the app on your phone, or you can just Google the verses that we need. But I need you to be able to look at the verses. I need you to be able to read the ayat with me and follow along. So if you want to have it open, there will be 2 main verses that we're going to be looking at, or maybe 3 main verses that we're going to be looking at. So if you open your Qur'ans, your apps, or on Google, please have Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273 open. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273 open on your phones. And chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. So if you have these 2 verses at least open on your phone, or if you want to actually have the Quran is there in the corner. If you want to have it, actually have it open, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sayyidina. Sayyidina. Is there a buzzing sound that's coming from above? Do you know what that is?
Then,
Or is it just me?
no, this is a buzzing sound.
Okay. That would. It's not from the mic? Can you hear that? Is it from the mic or?
It's from the small mic.
Okay. Khair, inshallah. Okay. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يسألونك ماذا ينفقون قل العفو آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the first discussion, we looked at how Islam seeks to redistribute wealth across the various classes of people that are within its reach. Second, last night, we looked at how Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam stated that they prefer to give loans over giving charity. There was a relationship between the two of them. And we stated in the first night that whatever is your personal surplus, whatever is your excess wealth, does not belong to you, but rather you are a treasurer of it for someone else. One of the ways we can utilize this excess wealth is by investing in people through loans. We can either do that directly, or as per the traditional Islamic system, there is sort of a centralized system of Baytul Mal, and collectively we could give that wealth to a centralized system which then redistributes it to those people who are in need. Qarth and Qardul Hasana are one of the charitable avenues that are mentioned in the Holy Quran. When we say charitable avenues, what we mean is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has either directly or indirectly mentioned ways in which we can support different causes in order to be able to uplift the means of the ummah, or to be able to support the strategic progress of the Muslim ummah. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions on a number of occasions, at least 6 times within the Quran, the practice of qarth and the practice of qardul hasana, is evidence that one of the ways that my excess wealth can go towards is this way. If I have an excess this month of $50 or $1,000 or $10,000, the fact that the Quran explicitly calls or mentions the practices of qarth and qardul hasana shows that this is one of the different ways that I could invest my excess wealth into, or my charitable services into. Immediately this should raise the question, well, if Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has mentioned qarth and qardul hasana, what are the other ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned that my excess wealth or my charitable donations can go towards? And this is something that we've been alluding to over the previous 2 nights. I've mentioned on the previous nights that there are maybe 3 challenges as to why we don't know of these various different means and avenues to be able to spend our wealth, because the way our wealth tends to be governed and the way in which we tend to spend our money is either, 1, through a capitalistic sense, or 2, the donor aid agency has determined where our charitable services go. We mentioned this on the last 2 nights. What is popular and mashhoor between us is to be able to give, for example, to aitam, to orphans, to aramil, to widows, to be able to invest in the building of our Husayniyat and our masajid, to be able to go to ta'aleem, to education services. And when there is a program or the community needs, we tend to be able to spend in this particular way, don't we? But here we have shown you that most probably our community has forgotten that there is a big emphasis on qarth and qardul hasana. Therefore, immediately we've expanded from orphans, widows, building mosques, education, and giving to the community program. We've immediately added a 6th cause, haven't we? And said that one of the ways that the Quran calls us towards is qarth and qardul hasana. We now have gone from 5 popular causes to a 6th cause. Even though our charitable services do not mention and guide us towards giving qarth, you now know that it's explicitly mentioned within the Quran and Ahadith if you did not know before. Or you've come to realize, yeah, actually there are more ways than the ones that are popular in our communities. So now we know that there are aid agencies. MashaAllah, many brilliant agencies doing phenomenal work. Al-Ain is doing great work. WF Aid is doing great work. Zahra Trust is doing great work. iOS Aid is doing great work. Lady Fatima Trust is doing great work. And so on and so forth. Be honest. How many times have you heard them say, give us qard and qard al-hasana? Versus how many times have they asked for charitable donations? You know the answer. And because it is determined by the agency and not by the Quranic-led instructions and the instructions of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, we are more likely to give $100 subscription once a month or something of that nature rather than qard and qard al-hasana, even though we showed you yesterday that Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam preferred to give qard over sadaqah. Immediately this should be raising questions in your mind. Well, if Allah Jalla Jalaluhu and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have given us an example of qard, well, what else is mentioned within the Quran that we are supposed to be giving our excess wealth and our charitable services to? And this is something that I wish to be able to raise with you tonight. Because, as I said yesterday, as an example, if there are 100 people in the community, and again, as a simple example, we have $1,000 as an excess. Every single month, how much is available to the community? 100,000. It could be less, it could be more. I'm just giving you examples to play with. If we raised $100,000 a month between us, paid that centrally into the Baytul Mal system as per the Islamic way, well, where should that money be going? Is $100,000 supposed to go towards aitam, orphans? Is $100,000 meant to be going towards building masajids? Is $100,000 supposed to be going towards qard and qard al-hasana? Well, where should it go? We can actually add a number of subsequent questions. If there are needs abroad, Afghanistan has a need, Yemen has a need, Iraq has a need, Pakistan has a need, but also there are needs locally, well, which one should be given to first? Instead of my personal answer of where I personally prefer this wealth to go, what is the Shari'i answer? And how do I prove that Shari'i answer? You see, here you can see the Islamic system has a lot of detail to offer. And no longer is it simply what is best advertised to you. Actually, there should be guidance from Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as to all of these details. And indeed there are. And this inshallah will be the depth and the breadth of the forthcoming book on Islamic charitable services and Islamic economic system. For tonight, Allahumma salli ala. For tonight, briefly, all I want to do is introduce to you the idea that there are some 25 Quranically endorsed avenues of charitable services where our excess wealth should be going to, where our charitable services should be going to, and that we think about the strategic wealth of the ummah as opposed to only the humanitarian wealth of the ummah. What do I mean by that? When we give to orphans in Afghanistan or in Yemen or in Pakistan or in Syria or in Iraq and so on and so forth, this is a humanitarian cause, isn't it? And so on. When there is an earthquake and we need to rebuild houses or give clothes, these charitable services are a humanitarian cause. The Quran doesn't only speak about humanitarian causes, it also speaks about strategic spending as well. And so what we want to be able to do tonight is at least introduce to you those various different causes, or at least some of them, so that you start to think about the way the Quran and Sunnah opens your mind as to where your monies are supposed to go to. I won't have time to be able to go through all 25, nor will I have time to evidence all 25, nor will I have time to be able to debate that if you have a cause which is abroad versus local, what should be spent? Or if you have a humanitarian cause versus a strategic cause, I don't have time to go through all of that. Inshallah, that will be in the subsequent book. But at least to be able to introduce to you so that you and I begin to rethink the way in which we use our wealth for a strategic cause and the way we begin to utilize our wealth in accordance with 25 Quranic causes that I mentioned, and not limit ourselves to the causes that are popular in front of us. Please open your Qur'ans to Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273. Now, before I speak to you about the ayah in particular, I want you and I to just become very conscious of an important point. The Quran was revealed twice. The first time was in its entirety to the heart of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. And the second was over 23 years. Everybody knows that, correct? Yes? Yes? So the entirety of the Quran is revealed to the heart of the Prophet on the night of Qadr. On the night of Qadr, the Prophet not only receives the entirety of the Quran, but he also receives the ta'weel of the Quran for that year. The meaning, interpretation, and application of the entirety of the Quran for that year. And then on the next Qadr, it is re-revealed to him again in its entirety, and again every single year, and that continues until every single year with the Imam of our time, Imam al-Mahdi, Ajjalallahu ta'ala faraj al-Sharif. It is also revealed piecemeal, verse by verse, chapter by chapter, over a span of 23 years. When there is an incident that takes place on the ground, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala re-reveals the particular verse or the particular surah in response to what is happening in the waqi', in the reality on the ground. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to reveal a verse to instruct the ummah and move them forward in a particular direction. He says, you've now accomplished X, I now want you to accomplish Y. You've now accomplished Y, I now want you to accomplish Z, and so on and so forth. The verse that we've been talking about in the previous 2 nights is an example, right? The verse from Surah Al-Baqarah said, يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ. They ask you, Ya Rasulullah, what should they spend? The response came, قُلْ الْعَفْوَ. Spend whatever is surplus in the way of Islam. Can you see? What was happening on the ground, in the mindset of the community, the questions that were being raised, the question was raised, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse to respond to what is happening. Sometimes it was one ayah. Sometimes an entire surah is revealed to respond to what is happening on the ground. For example, the Christians came to the Prophet and said, we have the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salam. What is your story of Yusuf alayhi salam? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the entirety of Surah Yusuf, chapter number 12 of the Holy Quran. Can you see? Sometimes a verse is revealed, sometimes a group of verses are revealed, sometimes a chapter is revealed, sometimes in response, sometimes pushing the mu'mineen and saying, now I want you to act in this particular way. Everybody understand? Great. When was Surah Al-Baqarah revealed? Who can tell me? Any ideas? Surah Al-Baqarah is the first chapter of the Quran to be revealed in the city of Medina al-Munawwarah. So after the Hijrah has taken place, in the first year of Hijrah, Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed. It's also revealed, a few other verses are revealed later on, year 2, year 3. But principally, Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed when? In year 1, in the city of Medina al-Munawwarah. So what has happened? You obviously know that the mu'mineen in Mecca have migrated to Medina, and now the Ansar and the Muhajirin are working with each other to be able to build the Muslim Ummah. Medina has a number of different religions and sects inside it. It has the Jews, it has the Christians, it has the Zoroastrians, and each of those has various different sects, and they all have various different beliefs between themselves. They are also dealing with the threat of the Quraysh from Mecca, and so they have spies inside Medina. They have to be able to deal with the various different situations that are occurring within Medina, from without Medina, and so on and so forth. And whenever situations developed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would reveal a verse or a group of verses in Surah Al-Baqarah in order to respond and to guide what the mu'mineen should do. Everybody understand? Excellent. Open Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273, inshaAllah. And I want to show you a very interesting verse. It helps us to understand what is taking place on the ground. Early on, remember, in the first year after the Hijrah. This is the context of the verse. Yes? Now let's have a read. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. لِلْفُقَرَاءِ الَّذِينَ أُحْصِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. Do you all have the translation with you? Yeah? Sayyidina, what does the translation say for you? Ahsant. Charity is for the poor. Now it doesn't say the word charity or sadaqah, does it? Look at the Arabic. لِلْفُقَرَاء. So what is li? What is for al-fuqara? Charity. So it's an implied meaning. And everybody is in agreement. There's no debate on this ayah. Charity, lil-fuqara, is for the fuqara. Now what is a faqir? Someone who earns less than his needs for a year. If your needs are $40,000 for 1 year, but you only earn $30,000, you are $10,000 short, you are called faqir. This is the meaning in Islam. Lil fuqara. Now which type of fuqara? This is very important. Allah is now placing a qaid, a sort of restriction on which type of fuqara this type of charity is for. It's not for all fuqara. Are you with me? Allah is now specifying. Everyone here could be faqir. But there are certain types of fuqara Allah wants this type of charity to go towards. لِلْفُقَرَاءِ الَّذِينَ أُحْصِرُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. Those poor, specifically, which are confined in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What happened to them? لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. They have no ability to be able to move about in the land. Who wants to tell me what is the tafsir of this ayah or the ma'na of this ayah? Whom specifically is being addressed here? Those that cannot move about in the land. Even if you want to guess, I don't mind. What do you think is being addressed here? Ahsant, very nice. Being injured in the war. Now, when was the first war in Islam? Battle of Badr. Which year did this occur? 2 after Hijrah. So Surah Al-Baqarah is being revealed. It has verses regarding Badr. Surah Al-Anfal is revealed regarding Badr. This is revealed differently about Badr. It's a good answer, and it might actually include people who might have been injured, and so they cannot go about. But the verse doesn't say those who are injured. It says fuqara. So it's an economic verse. It's a good answer, but the verse is more general. Think about the context. What did I say? Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed first year after Hijrah in Medina. What happened to the Medinans? They can't work. Why can't they work? What did they lose in Mecca? Everything. What does that mean, everything? Be specific. What did they lose? Their houses, their business. Now remember, in Mecca, there was a boycott, wasn't there? Everybody remember? When they boycotted a number of things. They said, we prohibit you from marrying into the Quraysh. It was a boycott. There was also an economic boycott. You cannot do business with anyone in Hijaz. Remember this? So where did the mu'mineen go? They went to the Sha'b of Abu Talib alayhi salam. And as long as that wealth lasted, they could live inside the Sha'b of Abu Talib alayhi salam, and then they had to leave, didn't they? Now think about this very carefully. If you all are from Mecca, your houses have been confiscated by the Quraysh, your businesses have been confiscated by the Quraysh, and your business contacts have been boycotted. You are not allowed to have business contacts throughout Arabia. Now you all move to Medina al-Munawwara. What is the opportunity for you to be able to restart your businesses in Arabia? What is the opportunity? Zero. Why zero? Because the whole of Hijaz has a boycott against you. Yesterday you were a tradesman, you were an entrepreneur, you used to buy from the Bedouins. Now the Bedouins have had to boycott you. Where are you going to get your business from? Yesterday you used to travel to a different part of Arabia in order to be able to get your stock. Now you can't, they've all boycotted you. Where are you going to get your stock from? You can't, can you? So reread the verse. Charity is for the fuqara. But which type of fuqara? Those who are now confined in Medina and they don't have, لا يستطيعون, they don't have opportunity, ضربا في الأرض. They don't have chance to be able to go about the land. You can't get to Yemen anymore. You can't get to Syria anymore. You can't get to Egypt anymore. You can't get to Mecca anymore. So be aware, understand what's happening. If charity was being raised, if charitable services were being raised and money was being raised in Medina, to whom did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell you to give that money to? To these fuqara that didn't have businesses anymore and didn't have ability to be financially independent anymore. Do you understand? Is everybody with me? Can you see how intelligent it is? It's obvious, isn't it? If you are the Prophet and you now see that there's 1,000 people that have lost their businesses and lost their business contacts, and now you are all raising charity to help people, where would that money go? Where would it go? To those people that have lost their businesses and lost their business contacts because of boycott. It's obvious, isn't it? It makes sense. Everybody understand? Can you see how the Quran works? When there was an incident on the ground, the Quran revealed a verse. Now, just because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about that 1400 years ago, has the Quran died? Is the Quran alive? Is the Quran applicable to today? Help me. Apply this verse today. You're all very intelligent people. What's the verse talking about? People who are migrating to a new city and have lost their ability to make business previously. The Quran invites you to be able to raise funds for those people who have lost their businesses. Apply the verse to today. Who is the Quran inviting you to support today? Whom? Ahsant. Migrants who have moved here and lost their independence, their businesses abroad, but now need to be able to start their businesses afresh here. It's so obvious, isn't it? It's one of the 25 avenues of charitable services. When you have a surplus and you say to yourself, well, whom am I supposed to give it to? Brother, this person used to be in Afghanistan. He's had to leave because of the Taliban. He's now moved to Massachusetts. He's now in the area. He wants to be able to start a business, but he doesn't have the money to start the business. Where do you think he's supposed to get the money from? From where? From your excess. You understand? Can you see how the Quran works? The verse doesn't suddenly become mansukh. It's not suddenly dropped. It's not suddenly an old verse. The verse is no longer, or it's not no longer applicable. The verse is in the Quran. All we had to do was dig into the Quran and see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inviting you to help a certain category of people. So now, if we have 50,000 a month surplus in the community, 20,000 a month surplus in the community, and someone migrates from Pakistan, someone migrates from Afghanistan, someone migrates, and they've lost their business, where is your excess being invited to support? Those people that have just come here and are looking to be able to start afresh. It's so obvious, isn't it? But this is how the redistribution of wealth works, and how the 25 causes in the Quran work. Now, the Quran didn't explicitly say, it didn't say to you, oh, you who believe, when a migrant comes over and he or she has lost their business, please support them if they want to start a business. Did it say that? No. Does it need to say it? No, it shouldn't need to say it. It shows you that 1400 years ago, when mu'mineen migrated from Mecca to Medina, and they were under boycott and lost their businesses in Mecca, and they arrived in Medina with nothing more than the clothes on their back, it expected the mu'mineen to understand, you are the Ansar. Collectively together, pool your wealth and help this mu'min get back on his feet. Because this is where your strength, your unity, and your independence comes from. And when he or she is able to pay you back, then he pays you back. But at the moment, he has nothing. Therefore, invest in him. Subhanallah. How many brothers and sisters have come to our communities from different parts of the world with a skill set, but they weren't able to bring enough with them in order to be able to start their business? Where do they go? Sadly, they go to the bank. And then they have a silly interest rate that they have to pay. And they're mired in debt. And then they have to put their house against that debt. Subhanallah. Look at the difference as to how Islam wants us to be able to work. Now, if you've understood that the Quran doesn't explicitly say to you, oh, you who believe, when a migrant comes and he or she is needing investment into their business, please give them something. You realize that the Quran doesn't speak in that language. It shows you historical examples and helps you to understand. This is what we do. We then review the Quran and collect the 25 different times in which the Quran invites you to be able to support a particular avenue through your wealth. This is called tadabbur mawdu'i. Tadabbur mawdu'i is for you to reflect on the Quran and take a theme of the Quran, to take a subject of the Quran and pool its verses together. When you read the Quran, you say, Ya Allah, you've told me about qard al-hasana. This is one way I can invest in people. You've told me that when migrants come and they've lost their business and they don't have ability to move around freely in the earth, I should support them. Ya Allah, well, what are the other ways that you've told me to be able to support people? And then as the reader of the Quran, The mutadabbir of the Quran, the one who ponders upon the Quran, he or she gathers the verses. And in my humble opinion, you will find some 25 different avenues of the Quran asking you to support different strategies, different causes within the Quran. Open the Quran, chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. Everybody's got that? Barakallah feekum. Now, if Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed in the first year after Hijrah, 50 points, who can tell me? When is Surah At-Tawbah revealed? In which year? You can guess, I don't mind. Okay. Do you have a year? So what was the surah about? What does Surah At-Tawbah talk about? The other name for Surah At-Tawbah is what? Surah Al-Bara'ah. Bara'ah from what? Or from whom? The history of Surah At-Tawbah is this. It is revealed in the 9th year after Hijrah. The Prophet died in which year after Hijrah? The 10th year after Hijrah. So this is revealed months before his death, in the 9th year after Hijrah. Everybody with me? It is revealed regarding 3 major issues. Surah At-Tawbah addresses 3 major issues. Number 1, it is a declaration of war upon the polytheists of Mecca. It says, we had an agreement. Medina and Mecca had an agreement. You Meccans broke the agreement so often that we are giving you 4 months. And after that, we are going to attack you. That's the end of it. We're not putting up with your treachery anymore. This is the first thing it deals with. Number 2, second thing it deals with is that there is an impending war on the northernmost tip of the Ummah, between the Arab border and the modern day Syrian border. In the modern day Syrian border, 1400 years ago, the Roman Empire had their empire and territory up until modern day Syria. They wanted to invade into the Islamic regions. The Quran said, you need to fight against the Roman Empire during the life of the Prophet. Because if you are scared now, what will be happening to you after his death? If you can't muster the support to push back against the Roman Empire now, when the Prophet dies, will you look after yourselves and push back against? No, you won't. So you need to raise your forces and protect your borders in the northernmost tip. Go and fight the Roman Empire. This was the Battle of Tabuk. This is the second thing Surah At-Tawbah deals with. The third thing that Surah At-Tawbah deals with is internally in the Ummah, there are hypocrites. You need to be able to learn how to deal with the hypocrites before the death of the Prophet, because otherwise after him, they will ransack the entirety of the Ummah. And what did they do? Sadly, they caused a coup inside the Muslim Ummah, stealing the Khilafat from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Can you see how Surah At-Tawbah is dealing with what is happening on the ground? Can you see? This is in the months leading up to the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, because the Ummah has expanded so much all the way to the northern tip of Arabia, bordering with modern day Syria, and
all the way to the southernmost tip where Yemen is. This is how big the ummah has become. The circumstances on the ground have changed, haven't they? Surah Al-Baqarah is dealing with what? Just Medina al-Munawwara. Now that Islam has grown, the ummah has grown, the concerns of the ummah have also grown. So has the wealth of the ummah also grown. Because if you've now got tribes all the way from Yemen to Syria, the zakat has increased. The khums has increased. The amwal has increased. Can you see? So now, when Allah tells the mu'mineen how to be able to deal with the wealth of the ummah, it also needs to update how to be able to deal with the wealth of the ummah. Are you all with me? Everybody's with me? Open the Quran, Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. And let's have another read of how the Quran speaks about how and where our wealth is supposed to go. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما الصدقات. Sadaqat is only for the following categories. للفقراء. Tell me something. In the previous ayah that we talked about from Surah Al-Baqarah, who was it for? للفقراء الذين. So it was for fuqara and then gave a qaid as to which specific fuqara it was for. Those people who have lost their businesses. Now Allah does not give a qaid. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. How many different categories are mentioned in this ayah? Tell me. Count them. How many? No. 8. 8. I said 8 different categories are mentioned here. Isn't that interesting? At one point the Quran tells you sadaqah is for this specific category. Allah now adds categories. Why? Say it louder so everyone can hear. The wealth has grown. And so because the wealth of the community has grown, the number of categories of people and avenues it is responsible for has also grown. It's obvious, isn't it? Sayyidina, what year did you move here? To the States? 2001. When you moved here, where did you move from? Ahsan. And before that? Ahsan. So when you were in Pakistan and you moved, you may not have had so much with you. And many people who moved here, when they first were migrants, they didn't have as much with them. True or not? But now you can see 20, 30 years later, the community is economically more powerful. It's a second and third generation community. Many people are educated. Many of you are entrepreneurs. Many of you have expanded businesses. When we first moved to these countries in the West, many of us, we weren't as educated, correct? Sometimes we used to do different jobs. Sometimes we opened restaurants. Sometimes we were taxi drivers. Sometimes. But then when we had children and they went to university, they became more educated than us. What happened? They went into different fields. Now, mashallah, you have people in banking. Now, mashallah, you have entrepreneurs. Now, mashallah, mashallah, ila mashallah. Is the community the same? No, it's not. 30 years later, necessarily, the wealth of the community has grown. When you first migrated here, the sadaqat should have gone to what? To invest in each other's businesses, to get you off the ground. 30 years later, now that you are a powerful economic community, Allah increases the number of avenues for you to invest in people in. SubhanAllah, it's so obvious, isn't it? But have you ever read the Quran like that?
Have the ulama explained the Quran to you like this? No. No. But when you know Surah Al-Baqarah is revealed in year 1, and you read it through that lens, and you know Surah At-Tawbah is revealed in year 9, and you can read it through that lens, you now see in year 1, Allah tells the early mu'mineen, invest in each other's businesses, grow your ummah again. By the year 9, you have an ummah that expands from Yemen to Syria, and is so strong, it can now fight the Roman Empire. Imagine how powerful this ummah is. Can you see? Allah now tells us there are 8 extra categories of charitable services that you are obligated to invest into. Does it make sense? Do you understand? It's interesting, isn't it? You see, when you read the Quran properly, and not just in order to get through it to the end, or you only read one surah every single week, Yasin every single week, or when someone dies, we only read Surah Al-Waqi'ah, we only read Surah Al-Rahman, we only read Surah Al-Mulk. When you actually read the Quran, you can see the depth that exists within it. How it governs, how it's a constitution for our thinking, subhanAllah. Now let's read this verse again and make sure we understand the 8 categories of charitable services that I mentioned. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما الصدقات للفقراء. Remind me again, what is the ma'na of fuqara? Someone who earns less than their annual need. وَالْمَسَاكِينَ. What is a masakin? What is miskin? Shar'an. What is the root word of masakin? Sakana. Miskin is the one who not only earns less than his need for the year, he is stuck at home and cannot go out and work. Can you see the difference? Faqir earns less, but has ability to go and get a job. Miskin is someone who earns less, but has no ability to go out and get a job. Give me an example of someone who might be miskin. Ahsant. Someone who is ill, someone who is disabled, someone who is elderly. An elderly person may want to be in the job market, but there's no jobs for the person of the age of 80. If he's earning less than his needs and he's confined to his house, he is miskin. Ahsantum. Look at the verse. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها. What does عاملين عليها mean? Anyone know? Ahsant. He is someone who is employed by the ummah to work for the needs of the ummah. Traditionally, it was a tax collector. So remember, the ummah has now expanded from Yemen to Syria. If you work for the ummah, who pays your wages? The ummah. Ahsantum. So from our surplus, we put the money into Bayt al-Mal. Bayt al-Mal pays the worker on behalf of the ummah. We have people who work full-time, part-time for the ummah. They also have to be paid. وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا وَالْمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُمْ. This one is interesting. This is known as ta'leef. Who knows what ta'leef is? 50 points. Please whom? Or what is the meaning firstly, the ma'na, the definition, the ta'rif of ta'leef or mu'allafati qulubuhum?
It generates some love and affection or respect in someone's heart.
Ahsant, very nice. Ta'leef means to unite the hearts between two people. Specifically whom? Our ahadith give us 2 specifics. Number 1, those enemies of Islam who might reduce their enmity if you financially work with them. This is one category of ta'leef. The second category of ta'leef, weak-hearted Muslims that are on the verge of leaving Islam. If you financially support them, they will stay in Islam. This is ta'leef, to unite the hearts. Have you ever heard of this before? Hands up, how many people have heard? Be honest, how many of you have heard of ta'leef as a category of where your charitable services and excess wealth is supposed to go? Hands up. Ahsan. 3, 4. Out of 50 people. But it's explicitly mentioned in the Quran. Why has no one told this to you? Because your wealth is governed by the aid agencies and not by the Quranic vision. You know, at the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he had enemies. They hated him, they hated the Quran, but their enmity could change if they realized that the Prophet loved them and cared for them. I'll give you a simple example. You remember how I was telling you what the Muslims were boycotted? When the Muslims became more powerful, they could boycott their enemies. You understand? If now the Ummah has expanded from Yemen all the way to Syria, and there's only Makkah left, the mu'mineen in the Ummah could now boycott the Quraysh. Now, if you were a Meccan Quraysh who had hatred for Islam, and now you were the one boycotted by the rest of Arabia, you know what the Prophet used to do? He used to say, come. I know yesterday you were a powerful businessman. Abu Sufyan, you were a powerful businessman. But now the tide has changed. You are the one being boycotted, not us. But if I can invest in you, it will show you that our enmity is not because of wealth. You have no reason to be against me because of wealth and Islam. Let me show you that I care about you and I will invest in you. But I need to know, can we become closer? Can we sit for a couple of hours and discuss Islam? This is what the Prophet used to do. He used to invest in people who had enmity on the proviso that he thought he could reduce the enmity towards him. This is explicitly mentioned in Ahadith. Every scholar agrees in this. There's no difference of opinion in this, by the way. Apply it till today. Who is it in this country that has real hatred for us? I'll give you an example. Evangelical Christians. Many of them hate Muslims, true or not? But which category of people are hit hardest financially in this country? Sadly, also sometimes the evangelical Christians. Right? This is why when someone like a Donald Trump says, I'm going to make America great again, I'm going to get your jobs back from China. Sadly, they're all gullible, but they believe it, don't they? So you can see, imagine if you are an evangelical Christian that hates Islam, hates Muslims, hates what you've heard about the Prophet, hates what you've heard about the Quran. But sadly, you are out of work and your children are suffering. Imagine the strategic Muslim said, come here, I'm going to help you. I'm going to invest in your business. This is called ta'leef. To unite the hearts and to reduce the enmity of someone who may be against you through your financial power, through your financial contribution. You know, until today, there are still some people that say, I've never met a Muslim. You've seen those people, right? They don't know anyone. So all they know about Islam is what Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi showed them. True or not? All they know about Islam is what Osama bin Laden showed them. Imagine you showed them the Islam of Quran and Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. This is what the Prophet used to do with his financial power. And now you know there are also weak-hearted Muslims that are on the verge of leaving Islam because no one supports them, no one listens to them, no one has time for them. Ta'leef is supposed to go towards them. I'm going to ask again and again and again. Tell me, which Islamic or Shi'i charitable services do you know of that collects funds for ta'leef? Name me one. Raja, please. Subhanallah. But you've seen it in the Quran, right? I'm not lying to you, correct? You've seen it now with your own eyes. Why do they not raise this issue? Think about it. Let's continue reading. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب. في الرقاب is what? Slaves. Now I know all of you know how important was freeing slaves 1400 years ago to the entirety of the movement of Islam. How important? The earliest movement in Mecca was all about buying slaves. Bilal al-Habashi was bought as a slave from Umayyah bin Khalaf. I'm not telling you anything new, correct? You know this. The Muslims used to free slaves and they used to convert to Islam. You know this. The Quran says that until today we are supposed to be freeing slaves. Tell me, which Islamic, Shi'i, charitable organization until today free slaves? Why? Are we following the Quran or are we following what the agency tells you? There are both historical slaves and modern day slaves. You know the difference between the two, right? Historical slavery are those people who are literally bought and sold. You know that. Do you know till today historical slavery still exists? You know that, yes? Please tell me you know this. You know when Hillary Clinton and her gang destroyed Libya, until today, you can Google image this yourself. If you want to actually do it, go into Google image and type in slave market Libya. Until today, because of NATO's destruction of Libya, until today, there are physical slave markets where human beings are bought and sold as if it was the 17th century. You know, when ISIS destroyed, ran havoc in Iraq and Syria, you know they used to take slaves. They used to take Yazidi girls. Say it now, am I correct? You know that there were slave girls that could be bought, you could free them for $50. Sadly, if they were young and virgin, they would go for $250. If they were elderly, they would go for $50. Did you know this? They had a slave market. And work agencies, UN-led agencies, were going there, buying them, freeing them. True or not? Think about what I'm saying. My excess wealth, I think, is mine, subhanAllah. I don't need another pair of sneakers, I go and buy one. I don't need another pair of cleats, I go and buy one. That $50 could have spared a woman from being ravaged by a despicable man from ISIS. Again, I ask, which Shi'i agency continues to raise money to free slaves? During the pandemic in the UK, in Leicester, how many of you know the city of Leicester? Many of you? Some of you? Yeah? City of Leicester. During the pandemic, sweatshops, forget Vietnam, sweatshops continued to be open. People earning £1 an hour during the pandemic, forced in middle of 2020 to continue making clothes for us, so it can go and be sold in our malls and our shops. Can you imagine what we can do with our wealth? إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين. Anyone know what is غارمين? غارمين are those people who are overburdened by debt. We are supposed to intervene so that they don't go bankrupt. In Islam, one of the worst things is for a person to go bankrupt. In Islam, God forbid, if you go bankrupt, you're not allowed to lose your house. Did you know that? Here, If you go bankrupt, the bank takes the house. Can you imagine someone losing their house? Someone losing their business? The Quran says we are supposed to help people who are overburdened by debts so that they don't have to be burdened by that mentally. SubhanAllah. A person who is overburdened by debts, they can't think straight. It's a mental block for them. Can they concentrate in their salah? Can they look after their family? Can they come to the Husayniyah? Their whole mindset is, tomorrow the bank's going to take my house. Tomorrow the bank's going to take my business. We are supposed to help one another. Stop this from happening. In fact, in the book, I go into the Sahm al-Gharimeen. وَالْغَارِمِينَ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ وَابْنِ السَّبِيلِ. Now look at the last part of the ayah. فَرِيدَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ. This is an ordinance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is not saying, hey, you get a choice. You want to do it? Do it. You don't want to do it? No problem. فَرِيدَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ. How does it translate into your... This is a duty from Allah to you. An obligation from Allah to you. Where are the charitable services? Look at the end of the ayah. Wallahu alimun hakim. Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. Why do you think Allah has to conclude the ayah with these two sifat? What is he trying to say? Huh? He's watching you. But what does it say when Allah says, I am Hakim? Ahsant. Ya Allah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Afwan. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Muhammad ali Muhammad salawat.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allah is saying, I am Hakim, I am wise, I know where you should be investing your funds. Who knows better, me or Allah? Head of aid agency or Allah? Wallahu alimun hakim. Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. So why have we missed out on these charitable causes? Why is it that we don't know about these things? As I said, I don't have time to go through all 25 causes, but I've shown you 9 tonight. One, as an example, when people who have migrated, we're supposed to invest in them. These 9 causes, 8 causes, as the wealth of the ummah grows, as the power of the ummah grows, and we have more wealth and capacity, we are also supposed to expand where we are supporting. Now I understand if you just moved here 30 years ago, the wealth of the community is very limited. And now it's not. And tomorrow it will be even more, inshallah. And so we are obligated, faridatan min Allah. We are obligated as a duty to be able to support these causes. We don't have to support all of them, but the ummah and the community by and large has to support them. This is something very important. Last thing I want to show you is this is not the first time I've given this series of lectures. In a previous year in Manchester, in England, my series was the entire list of the 2025 causes. So I explained one each night. So for example, ta'leef, instead of reducing it to 5 minutes of explanation, I went through a whole lecture on the night of ta'leef. It's all its evidences in history, the ayat, the ahadith, how to apply it today, and so on and so forth. Then the next night, I did fir riqab, how to be able to deal with slavery back then and today. So what I did was, I gave this list to the community and said, before you knew about the 25 avenues of Quran, where would you spend your money? And I gave everyone, as an example, $50 or £50 and said, now you spend where you would normally spend it. Because they didn't know about the 25 avenues yet, even though I gave them 20, you could see how skewed the numbers are, because they only knew of 5 avenues or 6 avenues or 8 avenues. So they didn't know about the rest. So I said, where would you spend your money? This is before I gave them the series. Look at this. they would give to the poor, and this is a total number, 400, destitute, masakeen, 270, mu'allaf, those employed to work for the ummah, 10. Those whose hearts are to be won over, ta'leef, 0. I gave a whole community beforehand, before explaining to them what ta'leef is. Not one person gave a single pound towards ta'leef. Can you all see it? Yeah? Freeing humans from slavery, 80. Those overburdened by debt, 70. And so on and so forth. And you can see for yourself what the different causes are that are mentioned in the Quran, and where people before the series would have given their wealth. And then I asked them to redo where they would give their money once they understood the series. And you see, so previously, as an example, right, those whose hearts were to be won over, ta'leef, prior to the series, a total community gave it £0. Afterwards, what did it say? Can you see? 120. If I gave everyone $10, where would you give? Where would you give? Where would you give? All of a sudden, because they now knew the value, the strategic value, how the Quran talks about these things, how the ahadith talks about these things, now they would give their money slightly differently. Prior to the series, freeing humans from slavery, only 80. Freeing from slavery went up to 130. Prior to the series, orphans, can you see what's the number? 520. After they realized that there are other areas to be able to support, 150. Very interesting, isn't it? We did a little bit of a test to see how people were affected by this. And inshallah, I will publish the results in the forthcoming book. The idea behind showing this to you, just as a skeletal argument, just to present to you, is for you and I to think how the Quran invites us to think. To read the Quran with an open eye, not a closed eye. To understand that our wealth actually has a strategic demand to it. That there is more going on than simply the economic system and the charitable services that we are used to knowing. And the moment we begin to realize that, our community's wealth begins to shift, and the way in which we utilize the power that God has given to us will also shift. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the American Muslim community, the American Shi'i community, billions of dollars. True? If you think about the collective wealth of our community, just in the United States, or in one state, just here in Massachusetts, just in New York, just in. Can you imagine the power, the wealth that we have? But can you also think about the extent that we squander it? Can you also think about what we could do with it if we actually understood how to channel it, if we understood how to utilize it? And this was the purpose of the series, to give you a glimpse of the Islamic economic system and what we are actually capable of doing. And inshallah, as time goes, maybe we have more tawfiq to be able to explore these ideas together. Please don't think that this is the end. This is the beginning. And I invite you to think about this, to review the series, to challenge the ideas, but most importantly, to look back at how the Quran invites you to be able to spend your excess wealth, and to think as a community together in NEJAF Center, the greater Boston Shia community. Where does Allah demand your wealth go? How can you make a strategic impact on the greater Boston area based upon these categories that the Quran mentioned? Inshallah, with your leadership, with your guidance, you will be able to have a strategic understanding of where your wealth is supposed to go. Tonight, We are commemorating the martyrdom anniversary of our 6th holy Imam, Jafar-e-Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. And as we mentioned yesterday, his martyrdom is narrated to have been on the 25th of Shawwal. The great tyrant that was present during the time of the Imam's martyrdom was by the name of Mansur al-Dawaniti. Mansur was a tyrant like no other, an evil, corrupt individual. And according to our narrations, he tried to assassinate Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam 5 times before, on the 5th time, finally managing to poison the Imam. Amongst those times, it is said, he called Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam to his mansion and had a sword with him ready to be able to strike our Imam. The Imam alayhi salam was able to pacify his behavior, and the Imam was able to walk out safely. Another time that the Imam was attacked by Mansur was when Mansur decided to set the house of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam alight. Can you imagine not only Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam having to run through a burning house, but his family members, his children having to run from one room to another in order to escape the flames of that fire? The narration says Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was able to put out the fire, but after this he sits down on the ground outside the burning house and he begins to weep and he begins to cry. The companions come to him, they say, Ya Ibn Rasulullah, you managed to put the fire out. Why are you crying? We didn't think that you would cry over worldly belongings and losing worldly material belongings. Can you imagine the pain in the heart of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam? Wiping the tears from his eyes, he looks up and he says to them, I am not crying because I lost anything material in my house. I am crying because now I have a glimpse of understanding what my auntie Zainab went through on the night of the 11th of Muharram. Can you imagine Lady Ruqayya having to run from one part of the tent to another, having to escape the attacks of Shimr and Khuli? We are told by our Dhakireen that as Bibi Sakina is running out of the tents, the evil men came towards her. One slapped her across the face. One tore her earrings from her ears. She is bleeding from her ears. She is said to have said, our Dhakireen and poets tell us that she looked into the eyes of Khuli and Shimr and said, do you not know that we are the house of generosity? If you had just asked me, I would have given you my earrings. This is what Sayyidina Ruqayya and Sayyidina Sakina were like. On that night, as they were burning the tents, I want you to imagine Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. This Imam of yours is so weak, he cannot stand up. This Imam of yours is so weak that all he can do is lie down on a mat and on a rug. I want you to imagine Shimr bin Dil-Jawshan entering into that tent with the sword unsheathed. The blood of Imam al-Hussein is still upon that sword, and he calls out, O army of Yazid, do not leave any males alive. Can you imagine what he was about to do to Imam al-Sajjad? Can you imagine Sayyidina Zainab throwing herself between the sword of Shimr and the body of Imam al-Sajjad? Can you imagine her saying, Oh Shimr, you will have to kill me, Zainab, before I let you attack my Imam al-Sajjad? Can you imagine what occurred on the
11th of Muharram. Do you know what happened? The children running from tent to tent in the darkness of the night, they fell inside, they fell on the ground of Karbala. Not only did Karbala have thorn bushes, but brothers, this was a battlefield. There were broken swords, there were broken spears, there were arrows. Do you know what happened in the last moments of the life of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein? Umar ibn Sa'ad, la'natullahi alayhi, called out, fire your arrows at Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. Do you know how many thousands of arrows were littered on the grounds of Karbala? I want you to imagine the granddaughters of Rasulullah running out into that desert in the darkness of the night, and then falling onto broken swords, broken spearheads, arrows littered across the plains of Karbala. All Imam al-Sajjad can say, Zainab, I don't have the strength. Go and collect the children out there in the darkness of the night. Zainab and Kulthum had to bring the children back towards the smoldering tent. Imam al-Sadiq says, I remembered my auntie Zainab and Kulthum and what they had to go through on the 11th of Muharram.
ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ماتم حسين يا حسين. يا حسين
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، دے دیا منصور نے صادق کو زہر، دے دیا منصور نے صادق کو زہر، شین کی دنیا سے خزاں ہائے ہائے، شین کی دنیا سے خزاں ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، آج ہوئے منہ سے کاظم یتیم، آج ہوئے منہ سے کاظم یتیم، باپ کا صدمہ ہے بڑا ہائے ہائے، باپ کا صدمہ ہے بڑا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، کرتی ہے بیوہ یہی رو رو کے بہن، کرتی ہے بیوہ یہی رو رو کے بہن، راج میرا آج لٹا ہائے ہائے، راج میرا آج لٹا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، چین نہ حضرت کو ملا ایک دم، چین نہ حضرت کو ملا ایک دم، سہتے رہے ظلم و جفا ہائے ہائے، سہتے رہے ظلم و جفا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہائے، ہو گئی گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے حال یتیموں کا ہے غم سے تباہ حال یتیموں کا ہے غم سے تباہ کرتے ہیں سب آہو بکا ہائے ہائے کرتے ہیں سب آہو بکا ہائے ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے حال یتیموں کا غم سے تباہ حال یتیموں کا غم سے تباہ کرتے ہیں سب آہو بکا ہائے کرتے ہیں سب آہو بکا ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے حشر ہے عالم میں بپا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر پہ جفا ہائے ہو گئی جعفر کے جفا حسین یا 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 حسین یثرب سے سوئے کربلا ایک کارواں رخصت ہوا سر پہ علم سایہ فگن غازی کی آتی ہے صدا پہلا سفر زینب کا ہے سنسان کر دو راستہ کارواں کارواں عباس میر کارواں 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 کیا شان ہے کیا دبدبا کیا لوگ ہیں قرآن ماں صلی اللہ آیات کا ہے قافلہ مشو علم من کا نشان عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں اللہ کے پیارے ہیں یہ آل نبی سارے ہیں یہ قرآن کے پارے ہیں یہ کونین کے تارے ہیں یہ زیر قدم ہے آسمان عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں کوئی شبیہ ہے مصطفیٰ کوئی حسن کا دلربا ہے کوئی سے سیدہ شبیر کا یہ قافلہ تھامے علم جو ہے جواں عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں 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 عباس میر کارواں یثرب سے تابا کربلا ہر دن طواف قافلہ عباس کرتا ہی رہا پردے کا ذمہ دار تھا یوں مطمئن تھی بی بیا عباس میر کارواں کارواں کارواں
عباس میرے کارواں 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 عباس میرے کارواں لو آ گیا اس کا عالم غازی جسے کہتے ہیں ہم کہتے چلو یہ دم بدم عباس میرے لشکرم باب الحوائج مہربان عباس میرے کارواں 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 عباس میرے کارواں 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 عباس میرے کارواں جب شام پہنچا قافلہ خطبہ یہ زینب نے دیا سن لے یہ قوم اشکیا ہم ہیں بنا لا الہ کشتی ہے دی ہم بادباں عباس میرے کارواں 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 عباس میرے کارواں 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 عباس میرے کارواں
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین.
اس وقت جب کہ زینب دربار میں گئی تھی خاری نمازیوں سے محفل سجی ہوئی تھی ظالم یہ پوچھتا تھا غازی تیرا کہاں ہے بالوں سے منہ چھپائے زینب یہ کہہ رہی تھی اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے اذان سر چھپاؤں کہاں اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے اذان سر چھپاؤں کہاں مجمع عام میں بے وطن بے امان آ گیا کارواں اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے اذان سر چھپاؤں کہاں اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے اذان سر چھپاؤں کہاں میں بھی ہوں مرضیہ بنت خیر النساء میرے لہجے میں ہے بابا تیری ادا نام زینب میرا تو نے جو رکھ دیا دے دی اپنی زبان میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے اذان سر چھپاؤں کہاں بابا جان میری دعا مانگتی رہ گئی بام در سج گئے جیتے جی مر گئی حلقہ شام میں نام سن کر میرا مر گیا ناتوا میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے عطا سر جھکاؤں کہاں ہاتھ کانوں پہ ہے نیل گالوں پہ ہے اور نشان جو سکی نا کے شانوں پہ ہے ہر نشان سے یہی آ رہی ہے صدا بابا جان بابا جان اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے عطا سر جھکاؤں کہاں بابا جان یہ تیرا آخری تھا بیان تیری چادر بتا ایک غازی جوان مر گیا باوفا چھن گئی ہے ردا کہتی ہے بی بی عباس عباس ہائے عباس عباس رخ نہ پایا میرے باوفا کا وہ سے نوک نیزہ سے آنے لگا خاک پہ بہن کو در بدر دیکھ کے ننگ سے نہ پایا جوان اے میرے بابا جان ہو رہی ہے عطا سر جھکاؤ کہاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین وہ عابد بیمار تھا وہ عابد بیمار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا چلنے سے جو لاچار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور شام کا بازار تھا اور مصطفیٰ کی بیٹیاں مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی شبیر کی وہ لاڈلی سینے پہ جو شاکے پری سینے پہ جو شاکے پری جس کی ابا بن میں جلی جس کی ابا بن میں جلی منہ پر تماچوں کے نشا مولا حق امام یا حسن یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين ولي الله السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيد النساء العالمين السلام عليك يا عبد المصطفى السلام عليك يا رسول الله وعلى الأرواح التي حملت بنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعل ولا آخر الأهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى أئمة المعصومين من ملك وعلى أختك زينب وكلثوم وبنتك سكينة سلام الله وعلى أخيك أبو الفضل عباس بن حيدر القرار جميعا شهداء كربلاء السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين زين العابدين. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر القاسم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى وعلى أختك فاطمة أسمعكم. السلام عليك محمد بن علي التقين الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد النقي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي الأسقي. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن رضوان الله عليه. مهدي صاحب المعجم حسن الأسقي مولاي يا صاحب السر الأمان يا خليفة الرحمن. الأمان يا شريك القرآن. الأمان يا مظهر الإيمان. الأمان يا إمام السواد. حج الله تعالى فرج وسهل الله ما يقول.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك حجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعيدا حتى يسكنه الزكاة وتمنيه فيها نبيا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم اجعلنا من أنصاره وأوانيه.